Hi, I'm Ben Langer. I'm a family doctor living in Sioux Lookout. I travel to Satchko Lake First Nation 1 week every month, and I work in the obstetrics program at the hospital as well as inpatient wards and at the Northern Clinic. I am very interested in mushrooms and have taken a keen interest in mushrooms in and around Cedar Bay, and I'm happy to provide you a very incomplete guide. And I say very incomplete because I'm not a trained mycologist. I just have an interest. Every time I go to Cedar Bay, I see many mushrooms that I don't know what they are, and I can't even often find out what they are based on my field guide or the internet or an artificial intelligence app that looks at the picture, which is almost always wrong. So this is the best I can do. So, and it's just going to be an overview. So here we go. A disclaimer on edibility. So the first question almost everybody asks me on the walks, and that's people are curious, and it's cool to eat mushrooms. And the first thing they ask is, can you eat that? Eating mushrooms can be incredibly dangerous. There are mushrooms that can kill you with almost 100% certainty unless you get a new liver. And they can look very similar to other ones that are edible. So I'm not going to say what mushrooms are edible and which ones aren't. Sometimes you can tell from the name. But this is just I'm interested in the diversity of mushrooms. I do forage myself. But my primary interest is just how cool mushrooms are and how diverse they are, and how many different ways they can look and make a living. So if you're going to eat any mushroom, you have to be 100% sure, 1,000% sure what it is, because there are lookalikes that can kill you. So just be very, very sure, have a field guide, and if possible, go with somebody who has eaten mushrooms before and many times and is still healthy and talking to you, and pick with them first, and they will tell you exactly what to look for, exactly what not to, and what the lookalikes are. Don't go into this haphazardly. So a very incomplete guide. Mushrooms are seasonal. They have fruiting conditions that they favor, just like plants. Some flowers always flower in April, some always flower in July. Mushrooms are similar. They have different triggers for what causes the mycelium, which is the big body of the mushroom, to produce the fruit, which is the mushrooms. So, year by year, you'll see morels are in the spring, chanterelles in the mid to late summer, shaggy manes you'll see popping up in droves in September, and you'll get to know the season, and it's kind of fun to await kind of the next big flush of mushrooms. And then just again, mushrooms have a huge amount of diversity. Different field guides have different ways of classifying mushrooms. The one that I use classifies them by the color of their spore print. Some have kind of classify them into families that were thought to be kind of groupings that were natural, but we now know based on genetic analysis are not. Names and Latin names go through changes, sometimes by decades, so older guides will have different names. It's really complex. Don't get discouraged because there's actually so little known about mushroom diversity and field ecology. It's actually an area where if you really take a keen interest, mycology, you talk to your local mycologist at the University of Manitoba, at Lakehead, and they're so excited to talk to people who go out foraging, and they really want to know what you know if you're kind of a local expert. So it's an area where you can actually make a contribution. So but just so you know, mushrooms vary within populations in the same area by whether they're on a hill or in kind of a dry area or wet area. Geographical variations in the same species. There are species complexes, which are, it's complex, but don't get discouraged. So starting from the beginning, what are fungi? Because mushrooms are fungi. So you'll see this is kind of the whole tree of life, all of life on Earth. This branch is bacteria. This is a branch of archaea. They're often extremophiles, so it's extreme salt water or heat or something. And then this is eukaryotes, so anything from protozoa to plants, animals, fungi, you'll find in this red part. Interesting, there are these little green threads from bacteria into the rest of the tree, and that is, this one here is mitochondria. So there's a mitochondria ended up living inside our cells and still has its own DNA. And then here is another thread that goes to the plant branch, and that is cyanobacteria that turned into chloroplasts. So there were two events in the history of life where bacteria actually worked their way into eukaryotic cells and have stayed there. And every single animal has mitochondria, every single plant has mitochondria and chloroplasts. So fungi actually came off the tree after plants did. So fungi are actually closer related to animals than they are to plants. You can see that in the cell walls. They actually share the same protein that insects use in their cell walls, chitin, C-H-I-T-I-N, whereas plants use cellulose. So that's kind of just an interesting little fact. So there are kind of three major classifications of fungi. The tree of life of fungal life is actually really complex. This is more of a classification of how the fungi make a living. So yeasts are single-celled fungi, and like brewer's yeast is a good example, but there are millions of kinds of yeast, and we use them to make bread, also beer and wine, other fermented products. Molds form mycelial networks, so long, thin threads instead of just single cells. And examples of this, of kind of the way they're used and what you might see in them is blue cheese and penicillin, the first antibiotic, because fungi also have to battle bacteria in the soil. They produced some of the first antibiotics that we found. So penicillium produced penicillin. And then mushrooms. So mushrooms kind of are like molds. They've got a big mycelial network. That's kind of the big body of the organism. And then they make mushrooms as well, which are the fruit, basically, the fruiting body. And then our relationship with the mushrooms is complex, including this many thousand-year-old figure that was found in a cave where there's a shaman with mushrooms coming off of him. And that goes to show that mushrooms have been used in psychedelic experiences and spiritual experiences for thousands of years. And then just your regular old stuffed mushroom caps. A couple of non-fungi digressions. Slime molds you might see out there. You might mistake them for mushrooms, as well as lichen. I won't go into lichen because somebody else did that, but these are actually, they sometimes live as free living single-celled organisms, and when resources get scarce, they join together and form this big kind of protoplastic kind of body, and then they will form fruiting bodies from those and release spores. So they kind of go between living as a single cell and kind of this big protoplasmic network. So you might see those out there. And then there are also some plants, Monotropia flora, which is ghost plant. You'll see these in Cedar Bay as well. And they're actually plants that have learned to live like fungi in the sense that they don't have chlorophyll anymore. They don't derive their energy from the sun anymore. They are plants, but they actually feed off of mushrooms, not mushrooms in particular actually, but fungal hyphae in the soil. So especially fungal hyphae that are in relationship with plant roots. So they actually kind of steal energy that the plants are giving to the fungal networks. So they kind of eventually do get their food from the sunlight, but through one plant into a fungal network and then into them. What is a mushroom? So a mushroom is to mycelium what an apple is to a tree. So you see this is the hyphal network. It's either in wood or soil or compost. and eventually it undergoes sexual reproduction, and it forms a mushroom. And the mushroom's whole purpose is to then release spores, which go back into the soil. The spores then produce more hyphal networks. But you don't kill the mushroom actual organism, the fungal organism, by picking the mushroom any more than you kill a tree by picking an apple. It's just essentially the fruit. So you don't have to feel bad about picking mushrooms, especially once they're mature and they've released a whole bunch of spores. So how do mushrooms make their living? They have many different ways. Saprotrophic ones are decomposers, and they're actually crucial decomposers in ecosystems, breaking down hard woody plants. You can see the red rot in this log here is all caused by fungal decomposers. So examples are shiitake, which fruit on wood, agaricus, kind of decompose soil and compost, agaricus like button mushrooms. Mycorrhizal fungi are actually super interesting. They actually form very tight networks and even kind of protrude into plant roots, and the fungi increase the scavenging for nutrients in the soil, and in return the plants give them sugar to live. So a lot of boletes will form mycorrhizal networks, as well as many of you will know matsutake, which are pine mushrooms, which kind of, and a lot of these mycorrhizal species will favor one particular kind of tree, so you'll always find them under one kind of tree. And then there are parasitic ones, which actually grow on living trees. So birch boletes and chicken of the woods, which is this gorgeous yellow one there, are parasitic. Oh, I thought there was one on, oh yeah, right, so here we go. There are even mushrooms that are carnivorous. So oyster mushrooms are actually known to eat nematodes. They'll wrap their little hyphae around these little tiny roundworms and eat them for food. One fun thing about mushrooms is that, just like many things, is that you'll find, based on genetic analysis and looking at the genomes and building your kind of trees of life and branching points and common ancestors based on that, that things that we thought for a long time were related because they looked and lived similarly are actually not related at all. So we used to kind of classify the earth balls and the puffballs together. They're both kind of round and pretty consistently just mushroom tissue throughout, and they produce spores from the outside of the mushroom. So we thought, okay, so they must be related, share a common ancestor. But in fact, earth balls likely evolved from bolete-like mushrooms with pores, and puffballs evolved from gills, gilled mushrooms like field mushrooms or agaricus. So basics of mushroom identification. So kind of when you're looking through a field guide, when you find a mushroom you don't know about, these are just things to think about. So that when you're looking through field guide and it describes it, you can say, oh, it can't be that because it doesn't have gills like that, or it has a different thing under the cap. And this is kind of the basics. So some mushrooms have gills underneath the cap, some have pores, some have ridges, and some have teeth. And so that's kind of some basics of how to broadly classify. And then here's some fun terminology about how gills are attached. So this is really kind of, there are a lot of like little brown mushrooms, right? It's like, you know, just a little cap with some gills under it. It's pretty nondescript, and so this can help you looking through a guide or an identification key actually figure out exactly what it is. So the way that gills attach, and you can see in these pictures, will guide you in terms of exactly what a mushroom is, and then kind of the way that the cap is. So flat, you know, and this is actually nice because eventually you'll kind of see a mushroom even from, you know, 50 feet and be able to say, based on kind of the generally the way the cap is, oh, that's probably, you know, X, Y, or Z, right? So flat, a flat top one, you know, classically amanitas are like that. Conical, you think of things like of Tipler's Bane or the Coprinus ones. Convex, right? Boletes are kind of classically a convex shape like that. The only thing to think about is that is a lot of mushrooms at different points in their own life cycle will go through different phases and kind of look different stages. So hopefully a guide will tell you that as well. And then a last way to identify, and a lot of most guides will have with each entry, mushroom entry, what the color of the spore print is. So to take a spore print, you just kind of cut the stem off and you just have the cap left, and you put it on a white piece of paper and you put a glass over it to stop the spores from blowing all around. And then after 12 to 24 hours, you just pick it up and you've got a beautiful print like these. So I am not going to go into details because you don't want to be here for hours about the specifics in terms of identification of each of the mushrooms that I'm going to go through, but get a guide. Mycologists tend to be lovely, strange people, as you can see from the David Aurora picture. You can't see the picture in the back of mushrooms in Northeast North America, but George Barron was also a delightfully quirky guy. Just at least based on the picture in the back of his book. I haven't used mushrooms of Northeast North America. It's definitely not complete. I find things out there that I just can't find in there. But at least starting with a guide will help. Just carry it with you on your hikes and see what you can find. So starting in on the things you can find. The majority of these are my own pictures from Cedar Bay. Some of them are pulled from the internet if I didn't have a good enough one. So ASCOMYCETES. So the mushroom world is really kind of as one major division into ascomycetes and basidomycetes. Ascomycetes tend to kind of be rubbery, hollow, kind of thin-walled mushrooms that kind of have a cap formation like that, or as you know from morels, kind of the big hollow tubes. So you'll find all these in Cedar Bay. Alluria aurantia, more in September, the gorgeous kind of bright orange peel fungus. Morels are a spring fungus, often in like April or mid-May. There are many different kinds of species of morels. We tend to have the black morel or elata in northern Ontario at this point. And then be aware, because the Geometra esculenta will root around the same time as the morel, and you can see it's kind of got a similar, you know, if you really know what you're looking for, you won't mistake it, but people can mistake it. These are actually eaten in Finland, but they boil them like 8 times or something to get rid of the toxins. And I wouldn't need anything that you had to boil 8 times to get rid of the toxins. It probably wouldn't taste very good after that. Puffballs. So Calvatia gigantea grows all over Sioux Lookout, occasionally in the grass near Cedar Bay. It can get to be the size of a basketball, and it's just mushroom all throughout. And then there's also lots of really cool other kinds of puffballs. The gem-studded puffballs, really beautiful with all these little studs on it. They'll often grow pear-shaped puffballs. Another one not pictured there, but you'll often see those kind of lined up on logs. So this one, hold in your chuckles. The genus name, the family name is Phallaceae. The genus name is Phallus. So as you can see, they are a phallic mushroom. This Ravenel's stinkhorn was growing last year off to the left of the trail. near on that big wood chip pile about 100 meters into the main trail on Cedar Bay. They're called stinkhorns. They're kind of gross, but they're really cool. Amanitas. So Amanita muscaria, a fly agaric. It's like the Mario mushroom, right? This is I believe a Geswassi variation, so it's orange. A lot of the ones around here are orange and not bright red. The white spots on top are remnants of the universal veil, so they kind of start like eggs, and then they open up, and they're totally wrapped in a white kind of layer, and the white layer remains a little bit on top there. I did find a destroying angel. This is my own picture of a destroying angel in Cedar Bay last year, and destroying angel, as you could imagine, is highly toxic. It's almost universally fatal without a liver transplant if you ingest it. It makes you feel sick within a few hours, and then because nature is cruel, sometimes you feel better, and then you develop liver failure after about 24 hours after that, and then you likely will die without a liver transplant. So stay away. I mean, there are some amanitas that are edible. I, as a rule, stay away from all amanitas just because the the risk is not worth it. And you've got the cute little russulas. They are all over Cedar Bay, especially the cremory color. The cremory color ones can range anywhere from kind of light pink to kind of a deeper purple to this bright red. The russulas are almost always totally like bone white on the stem and in the gills, and then they have a beautiful color on the cap. They're called BRITTLEGILLS, so they kind of start like bell-shaped or oval. Let's actually go back to, right? So they are like kind of start off convex, right? Like this one, and then they can go to often look like this. So that is more like depressed. So with kind of a central depression to sometimes even infundibular or in a funnel shaped. Then the clariflava is bright yellow. The virescens is green. They're called BRITTLEGILLS. If you kind of rub their gills, the gills they kind of they're brittle. They kind of shatter almost. They don't bend and they don't kind of mush. They're really they're brittle. There's one guide that says if you can identify russulas by throwing them at a tree and they will kind of shatter when they hit the tree. LACTARIUS are closely related to the russulas. You can tell them apart when you break the stem of a LACTARIUS. They actually have a little bit of a milky substance that comes out, so they're by milk caps. The downy milk cap, or LACTARIUS pubescens, I like that name. It's kind of got a little ring of fuzz around the outside of the cap on the underside. And then the saffron milk cap is a beautiful kind of orange one. There's lots of different LACTARIUS in and around Cedar Bay. So PHOLIOTA and STROPHARIA are kind of another family. They're kind of interesting form and interesting colors. The shaggy scaly cap, the squarosa, is actually I've seen it in a few different places in and around Cedar Bay, and it's just cool that the whole stem and the whole cap are covered in these scales. And I haven't seen the flaming PHOLIOTA, but that's like bright orange and looks the same. So those are cool. And then there's Stropharia is another family. I've seen the questionable Stropharia once or twice around Cedar Bay. The honey mushrooms. So these kind of have a pretty classic shape. So even looking, this is one of those 50 feet identifications. They grow in these huge clusters on rotting logs. So Millia are kind of lighter orangey, and then the Ostiae. They're kind of the same species, really, different. They're a big species complex, they call it. But you can see this remnant of the ring here, the annulus, around the cap, and you really you can kind of spot that a mile away, and with the shape of the stem, the bunches, the annulus there, they're nice to be able to recognize. The Coprinus, the inky caps. So shaggy mane, they're really they're everywhere in September. They kind of start this like conical thing, and then it's like within hours sometimes they start to roll themselves up. So I didn't make did give you a picture of the shaggy mane when it's rolling up, but it kind of looks like this. With the tippler's bane, they just kind of basically dissolve into black ink. So interestingly, all of these, the shaggy mane. So the only reason I'm getting into edibility here is because it's kind of interesting, and that is that the tippler's bane in particular is called tippler's bane. Tippler being like an old-fashioned word for somebody who abuses alcohol. If you eat a mushroom like tippler's bane in the Coprinus family and drink alcohol within the 24 hours after, you get incredibly sick. And that's actually the basis for an older treatment for alcohol abuse, was derived from mushrooms. And basically he said, take this pill every day, and if you drink, you feel horrible. It didn't work very well because people, instead of taking the pill, they just didn't take the pill because they didn't want to feel horrible when they drank alcohol. So instead of not drinking the alcohol, they just didn't take the pill. But these are kind of that. If we go back to the caps, so the conical shape you can kind of spot quite a ways away for the tippler's bane. And then these big family of boletes. There's like hundreds of species of bolete. Around here, you kind of get three different bigger categories. So the lexinums, birch boletes, and others, and the scaber stalks. You can really tell what these, if you're dealing with a lexinum, because of this salt and pepper sort of scaly stalk. The Suilis, or Suilis genus have these kind of very wet, slimy caps. And this kind of slippery Jack and Jill are members of that genus. And then the king bolete, that sort of kind of bolete. The thing that makes boletes different is instead of gills underneath, they have pores. So if you look closely here at the top next to the title, you can see what the pores look like up close. And then I added this because it's kind of cool. A lot of the boletes stain blue when the tissue is injured. So people can sometimes write things on them or leave messages or do art with boletes. There are a couple of really cool Cortinarius species in and around Cedar Bay. I found these both last year. The Eodes, you can see when it's in this young phase, it's almost like bluey, purpley silver. It looked like almost space age. But as it gets older, the purple color kind of gets washed out to a lighter pink brown, and they get this kind of dry, cracked desert, like kind of a desert cracked sort of appearance on top. And then this Cortinarius violaceus, violet quart, the picture doesn't even do it justice. It's just this beautiful dark purple mushroom. It's one of the most beautiful ones I've found. And this was just from Cedar Bay last year. Some cool toothed fungi. I've been wanting to find a bleeding tooth for a long time, and there was one just on the fat bike trails in Cedar Bay in September last year. You can see it's not as dramatic as in some pictures you'll find in guides, but but it's a tooth fungus. So under here, there are little teeth like in the hedgehog. But it develops these little kind of bright red droplets on it, as you know, the name would suggest, bleeding tooth. Comb tooth was on a log just right on the main trail in Cedar Bay last year. It's related to lion's mane, which is a common cultivated one that you find in farmers markets and stuff. And it's also just so beautiful, kind of this endless branching kind of snowflake pattern almost. And then the hedgehog mushrooms. So you can see, like, it's, you know, not gills, it's not pores. When you find a toothed mushroom, it can be just pretty dramatically obvious that you're dealing with a toothed mushroom. This is the hedgehog mushroom, which can be found occasionally in and around Cedar Bay. And then the bracket fungi. So these are often long-lived, multiple years. They're hard and woody. You know, a lot of the classifications of bracket fungi is not necessarily like a natural family of related ones, but just how they've decided to make a living. So reishi, a common medicinal one, both Ganoderma, artist conch and reishi are both Ganoderma. The artist conch is really cool. So you can see on the underside, because you can just scratch away the spores and leave kind of a brownish pattern like the boletes, but you can do it in a more detailed way with this one. So you can see somebody's made a gorgeous drawing of horn of plenty on the bottom of this artist conch, and it's literally just with a sharp implement on the mushroom. That's all they've used to make this drawing. And then you'll see these birch polypores everywhere on birches in and around Cedar Bay. So chanterelles, most people will know that chanterelles are edible. And if you've been growing up picking them, then you'll know how to identify them. Just so you know, though, there are non-edible and even poisonous lookalikes of chanterelles, like the jack-o'-lantern mushroom, which is cool in its own right because in the dark it actually glows green in the dark. Look up jack-o'-lantern mushroom and you'll see that. It's pretty cool. And then there's a false chanterelle, which has true gills and kind of tightly packed gills instead of the ridges of the chanterelle. So just so you know, even if you've never gone out picking before, you haven't eaten these before, you find a yellow mushroom, it's not necessarily a chanterelle, and it could hurt you. And then in the chanterelle family also are these beautiful black trumpet mushrooms. I love the diametrically opposing names that they've received, such as horn of plenty and death trumpet. So you can see how different people have conceptualized them. A very cool mushroom, lobster mushrooms, and these are pretty unmistakable with the bright red orange color and lack of true gills. And they even smell a little bit like lobster. They've got a fishy smell, and you find these all along the fat bike trails of Cedar Bay. There's some out right now. They're actually not one mushroom. Russula brevipes is the common host of a parasitic fungus called Hypomyces lactiflorum, and this parasitizes the russula and makes it grow all funky and orange around the outside, and then you'll see these white spores start to develop on the lobsters, and that's actually the spores of the Hypomyces, not the russula. The russula never gets to make gills and never gets to actually produce spores of its own. And then, the coral and club fungi are all just so interesting and cool. They don't have gills. They're not polypores. They don't have pores. They don't have teeth. They actually develop the spores all around the outside of their bodies. And both these pictures are taken from Cedar Bay last year of this Ramaria species. and this Alloclavaria species. So that's it. There's a lot more information out there on the internet. These are good resources. Tom Vogt is a mycology legend. His website is very good. Mushroomappreciation.com is kind of readable articles, but that are pretty reliable. And then mushroomexpert.com is more of an academic style, which will go through every variation of the species name and much more detail about the actual mycology. I will make a plug, please. Do not harvest mushrooms from the Cedar Bay trails. Please leave them for others, even if you are 100% sure that they're edible and you want to eat them. There are just like endless crown land and logging roads and stuff where you can harvest mushrooms. The Cedar Bay trails, please try to leave mushrooms for others to enjoy. As my wife said, I don't think anybody enjoys them quite as much as you, but I would like you to. So I leave even edible things on the Cedar Bay trails, and I would ask you please to as well. Yeah, thanks so much, and I hope you get out there. Hope this guide is useful. As a very basic, incomplete starting point, that you get a guide or go out with some friends and see what you can find. If you find some cool mushrooms that you don't know what they are, then feel free to send them to me. You can find me through the Facebook page, the Sioux Lookout Mycological Society, which I've set up, which has close to 100 people that are just sharing mushroom pictures. All right, well, enjoy, and thanks so much for listening.